Hello and welcome to Starkey's monthly webinar. We're here in the Starkey's offices in Baltimore, Maryland. I'm Rabbi Tzvi Goldberg, your host, and today we're pleased to have Rabbi David Heber joining with us. Thank you for coming, Rabbi Heber.
Thank you for having me again.
These webinars are held the last Wednesday of each month, and they are archived on Vimeo. You can look on Vimeo, search for Starkey webinars, and you should be able to find them. You can also call in if you would like. I'll give you the phone number. It's 218-895-1203. Again, 218-895-1203. Passcode 2020. And I want to thank in advance our tech support, Rabbi Reuven Chapman, Ms. Debbie Rosenstein, for their continued assistance. So today we're going to talk about the leap second, Rabbi Heber, which I didn't know too much about before we looked into doing this. But you know, the Gemara says that we start with a light comment, a joke sometimes, right? So there is a joke about a certain shul that was very careful about starting on time. And they always would start the minyanim exactly on time. So the chazan goes up and he looks at the clock. He sees it says 10 o'clock. So he turns to the gabbai and he says, "Is it time?" The gabbai says, "No, now." So in other words, they got to do it exactly on time. So there is a lot. I think there's some interest about this leap second, like what it's all about and what is the meaning. We'll talk about first from an astronomical perspective. What is it? And secondly, from a halachic perspective. I should mention that Rabbi Heber is, as we put into the email, Rabbi Heber is an expert on zmanim, on Jewish time, and in time in Jewish law, and he has written his sefer called Sharei Zmanim, and it's available at what's the name of the rabbi? Rabbi Levitz, I think. Right? Is that correct?
Distributors. It's in some bookstores, but if you can't
it's
find
in some distributors, some bookstores, but distributed by Rabbi Levitz. So Rabbi Chapman, can you put this number down there for the sefer? 718-377.
1 second.
377-0047. So I know this, Rabbi Heber, looking around, that there's like some consternation about this. It's next week, next Tuesday, right?
Correct.
And the stock market is worried about it. They're worried they may crash.
Well, actually, they should be closed by then because it's a second before midnight in Greenwich time, so that would be 5 hours here. So it would be 7 o'clock at night. So in other words, it would be off hours. Could be their nervous.
Off-hour trading. There's off-hour trading. I'm not sure exactly what, but some of the markets are closing during that time because they're afraid of some glitches. Yeah. So let's start at the beginning, which is what is the leap second about, and why do we need it? And
sure. Okay. Yeah. So people think of time, of course, seconds. There are 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour. We all know that. 24 hours in a day. So if you break it down, it takes 24 hours for a day, which means the sun will rise in the morning, and 24 hours later it'll rise again. Now, as we all know, it's not exactly 24 hours later, but on average, if you take an average over the course of the year, sometimes the sun rises a little more than 24 hours later, sometimes a little less, but if over the course of the year, the time it takes for the sunrise to come is 24 hours. If you break that down into different parts, you'll see in a day you have 86,400 seconds. 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, etc. However, the Earth has the rotation of the Earth has irregularities in the rotation. Therefore, that a number of years back, as science became more, technology grew, and these exact ideas became more known to scientists. They realized that this average it's maybe a little bit off. So they redefined the second based on, it's known, you've heard the term atomic clock. Atomic clocks, what is an atomic clock? What does that mean? What is atomic about a clock? So the answer is it's precise, and it's based on certain cycles and frequencies of cesium atom radiation that's released, and there's a certain number given, 9,192,631,770. So you take that number.
What is that?
That's a certain number of the frequency of this atom, and when that happens that many times, that's a second.
I see.
Okay, so that's scientific stuff, which is beyond my exactly what's happening scientifically.
That's a lot of things to happen in one second.
Physicist. Well, there's a lot of atoms in this, in your fingernail. Also, it's unbelievable. The philosophy of the Baruch Shalom Cheshbons, it calculates every fraction, literally billions of a. It's going to make a difference to billions of this. Anyway, so it was sort of redefined that it was made, I guess, call it more precise. But what happens is over time, the Earth's because of these irregularities in the Earth, etc., they need to get it back on track so that it's everything's back. In Yiddish they say recognize, right? It's you calculate everything out and you make the calculations and you see that there's a variation periodically, and hence in order to get it back on track, they add a second periodically. This will be the 26th a leap second that's been added. It's typically added the last second of the year, December 31st, but also it could be done at the end of June.
So they're trying to get it in sync with the Earth's rotation. That much I understand. So, but I read that they started in 1977.
Something like that. It was in the 70s.
So what happened for the first 5,000 years?
Well, it was
of
off.
Earth?
In other words,
I mean, how did we exist? Somehow we didn't have a problem. So what happened in 1977 that they decided that we got to add a few seconds?
The answer is.
And why didn't they add 20 seconds or a minute at that time?
They didn't. It didn't matter, so to speak. And ultimately, really, in the scope of it, over thousands of years, it doesn't really make a difference. Now, what happens is because of so much technology, every second, right, has such a when you're dealing on the scope of satellites which work literally to the nanosecond, everything has to be
synced.
Extremely in sync.
What I put up on the screen over here was a screenshot from the last leap second, which was 3 years ago. So you can see the oddity of it. It says 23, 59, and 60 seconds. There isn't any 60 seconds. It should be 24, it should be,
exactly.
right?
It's the February 29th.
Or it should be not even 24, it should be the next day, right? It should be
correct.
It should be
exactly. We'll be ready Sunday.
So it really is
July 1st.
Really is the next day. So they added that's the leap second there, and they took a picture of it, and that's what the screenshot is. But I saw also that there are different ways of dealing with it. Some, computer-wise, some will add another second. Some will just stop the clock for a second, and some will extend the seconds. The last couple seconds before they'll be extended to be, let's say, a third of a second longer, and then it adds up to three seconds, and a third second adds up to a second. So there's different ways of dealing with it from a computer perspective. I want to mention that we do have a chat box here if anybody has any questions for Rabbi Heber, so feel free to chat with us. I'm going to bring that up right now. So feel free to chat here on the bottom. We'll try to take your questions. Okay, so that's in a nutshell what the leap second, what is it trying to do. But okay, let's move on to the halachas of it. Hilchos leap second.
Well, technically speaking, because it's such a small amount of time, practically speaking, for example, if you're looking at a zmanim, we usually don't leave things to the last second anyway. In other words, if you're looking at the Seif Shema Kriya Shema, for example, the next day of any luach, and you're looking at it to the second, which I'll tell you why that's not such a good idea to wait till the last second. L'maisa, technically it'll be 1 second off because all that has to get back into sync once you've added a second. Just like Mashal Madav Doima, if you use a sunrise sunset chart, the old Navy charts that were used for every year, technically, if you had a March 1st coming after February 29th, those times were varied because some years you had February 29th, some years you didn't. So if you add a February 29th, you're looking at this Manayim of March 1st. For that matter, the whole year, it's going to be, the sunrise sunset's going to be different on March 1st after February 29th.
Don't they have different charts for that?
Well, now in the more sophisticated world we live in, there are charts that come out for every year. But the Naval Observatory, which is what you know, as a kid, you know, we grew up with those charts.
I didn't grow up with those charts. Maybe you did.
Okay. There were a few. There were already out when I was a kid. There were computer generated charts, but not really to the second, and they were hard to find for, you know, every year a new one. That's a relatively new thing. But L'maisa, again, practically speaking, there's not really such an afkamina because no one should wait till the last second to say Krishma because it's not a good idea. Second of all, you can't get it done by then in a second. And most important, even charts that give you to the second are not exact. Because let's say talk about sunrise, and the reason for that is when you look at a chart of sunrise and sunset to the second, there are various factors that could change that, including the weather, the barometric pressure, and so on. So there's no way to sit here, there's no way for me to tell you right now definitively when sunset will be tonight in Baltimore, Maryland to the second. There's no way to know. Pretty much until you figure out the weather conditions that are going on at that point. Of course, even altitude could have an impact, which is a really separate issue. But I've gotten calls. You know, baby was born inside the hospital, which is the hospital many children and from families use in Baltimore, and they had a baby right at the shkia. And now the question is, when's the bris? Is it let's say it would be today? Is the bris going to be next week on Wednesday or Thursday? And we sat, and you know, there are two resident experts in town that can make these calculations, Dr. Fishkind and Rebelli Reidler, and we sat on the phone analyzing exactly where Sinai Hospital is, what the weather conditions were, to try to get to the second as to when Shkia was in order to determine that. But when it's so close anyway, you should anyway, if a baby was born 5 seconds before your calculated Shkia, for that matter, 40 seconds, right? You have to make sure everything, you know, was there. Then you really have to wait.
Zev says that 300 years ago, there was no way anyone could have known exactly when sunset and sunrise. It was all approximations.
Well, you could watch sunrise, so you could actually watch. In other words, to sit and calculate it on paper was much harder. In those days, in a way, it was easier because there weren't such tall buildings, and therefore you could just go outside. When they say daven at Nates, Hachama, the days of the Gemara, we have to assume that they had those yediyas. Really, you could go outside, and it was a natural phenomenon. Unlike today, you know, when I'm out driving somewhere in the middle of nowhere at Shkia time, the biggest thrill is to try to calculate exactly when that sun dipped. And then if I'm able to know exactly where I was, it's rare I could do this, but you know, make the calculations that, oh, I actually saw the true sunset.
Okay.
That's rare.
So the short term, there is no real difference for a second.
Correct.
What about long term, over a period of time? You said there's been 25 seconds.
Right, this will be the 26th.
Could that make a difference?
It's actually in when I wrote the Sefer, so I tried to come up with, I have a parak on Kiddush Levana, when the latest time say Kiddush Levana is, and the earliest time say Kiddush Levana. Now, the Ramah says the latest time say Kiddush Levana is halfway between one Mailad and the next. In other words, basically until the moment the moon becomes full, it's the latest time you could say Kiddush Levana. Actually, to remind everybody, a lot of places were cloudy this week. Once it's Shabbos, people should say Kiddush Levana when they have the opportunity to do so.
It was cloudy.
It was cloudy. It's past much Shabbos on the parts of the East Coast. But anyway, what is the absolute latest possible moment to say Kiddush Levana? So it's halfway between one Mailad and the next. Now, the time of the Mailad that's given is the time of Yerushalayim, and we assume it's the Harpayis, and more specific, the Makam and the hakadoshim. That's the Shas HaMailad. When they give that time, the Mailad is an astronomical event when the moon is between the Earth and the Sun, and they're aligned, sometimes a little higher or lower, so it's not an eclipse, but it's could be an eclipse at that moment, which is a whole other discussion. But they're all aligned, and at that moment when they're aligned, what is, on average, what is the time on hakadoshim? Now, over time, so when is that, and how do you make those calculations? So over time, the clocks have been changed, which have had practical nafkaminas, the difference in halacha, which maybe we'll talk about a little bit later. But for example, standard time was a change in Yerushalayim, changed their time 21 minutes. They turned their clock 21 minutes to facilitate what we call standard time, which means the whole standard time zone that Yerushalayim is in is 2 hours later than England, 7 hours later than America. the time in Baltimore needs
So
to be
when did
different
they
than New York.
So they added 21 minutes?
They actually, at one day when it was 12:21, approximately, actually 12:20 and 56 seconds, they turned their clocks back.
When was that?
So I don't know when Yerushalayim did it. In America, it was done, I believe, on May 18th, 1883.
Uh-huh.
The railroads actually called for this because railroad were different times. There was a lot of confusion. New York had a different time than Baltimore. Boston, Philly, New York, Baltimore, Washington, all had different times. It was a different time at any given moment. It was right now, it's 12:16 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, actually it's Daylight Savings Time, Eastern Daylight Time, but that's all because we all turned our clocks on May 18th, 1883,
Mm-hmm.
so that the whole East Coast, for that matter, the whole Eastern Time Zone, was in sync, and that's the way it's remained. Some of the time zone has been changed a little bit. Some cities have flipped from one to the other, but basically we have the same 4 time zones since 1883. It was May or November. It was mixed up which one it was. I think maybe it was November 18th. But either way, it was 1883. Now, Eretz Yisrael also made that change. So that's one difference. That has a ramification on, according to many shittas, because if we tampered with the clock. Anyway, to make a long story short, one of the things I discussed is, in my original version of the Sefer, I wrote that you have to change it by, when I wrote the Sefer it was only 23 seconds, but now it will be 26 seconds. This Sefer has to be modified by 26 seconds because of the change. Now, practically speaking, who's waiting till the last 26 seconds in Kishavana, right?
So you mean with the time that they announce?
Well, they always announce the mile.
They're announcing the mile, but the time for the end.
From there. When you go from there, how much do you add to get to your point?
You have to add 26 seconds. That's what you're saying. That's what you wrote in the book.
You would deduct 26 seconds, right?
Okay.
So someone actually, I got 2 letters from people who read the Sefer, explaining that fakert, the opposite is true, because the real time is the leap second is fixing the clock. The fact that it got off was wrong. In other words, had it not been for the leap second, you would then have to modify it by 26 seconds because it's off.
So they were correcting it, so now it's the correct time.
So that's correct time, right? So I did a little research on this. Exactly when you say the Ma'ilin, and which one is it using? Is it the Chazal didn't have the cesium atom to reckon with, so how there were the irregularities there. So in the end, I was specific. So what happened? I republished the Sefer really only electronically, and there were a number of errors in there. Some numbers were off, and there were some typos, etc. Some cheshbonos were off. So I redid it and corrected those. And actually, it was put up on HebrewBooks.org, where the Sefer is available. And in there, I changed that as a blanket statement to more of tzarchiyim, and saying that what impact does this leap second have on the exact time of the Sefer?
In other words, they may be getting, it might not now, it might be correct, where beforehand it was incorrect.
Correct.
Oh, very good, okay. Okay, we have a few comments over here. Adam wants to talk more about the birth. When did he count the birth? And we'll leave that for afterwards. You can contact Rabbi Heber for that. Pinchas says that on November 18th.
November 18th, yeah, okay.
They switched to a new standard time.
Right, correct. November 18th, not May 18th.
So you mentioned while you was talking, Rabbi Heber, that about the Har HaBayis, about the Temple Mount and the kodesh hakadoshim, the Holy of Holies. That's where. Could you explain how that fits into the...
Right, correct. In other words, if we're saying that every place really has a different time based on your location, and that Baltimore, Philadelphia, actually Baltimore changed to standard time, which was a line running through basically the city of Philadelphia, a little bit to sort of the east part. So everyone changed. So when you're dealing with the Mila time, that is dealing not with the standard time, but it's telling you the solar time of Yerushalayim HaKodesh. Namely the Har HaBayis. So I tried to calculate exactly, in coming up with the section of Kishavana, I calculated where is exactly the Har HaBayis. And that's going to be really the basis of 2 things. Number one, the Shas HaMayla is for that place. So if you want to change...
So the Mola that we announce in Shul every month is in Yerushalayim. That much I know.
That's the time of it's the time in Yerushalayim on average of when these, the sun, moon, and earth are aligned, which is the Shas HaMayla, by the way. Mayla means born. The moon gets smaller, smaller, smaller. There's a split second where they're aligned, and a split second, less than a split second later, it all happens. It goes to zero and then starts again.
So
That's Shas HaMayla.
So what does it have to do with the kodesh hakadoshim exactly?
So we're just saying that the way that the time of the Mailad would be, when you say the Mailad is at 2 p.m. this coming Wednesday, let's say, or this coming whatever the time announced, that is the solar time at the kodesh hakadoshim. On average at the Kosher hakadoshim, that's the time, and therefore that's your starting point. And now, if you want to calculate standard time, you have to take that point and see how much off the standard time line it is. So again, Baltimore to Philadelphia, the Eastern time zone is based on 75 degrees west of Greenwich. Greenwich, of course, is a line that runs through an observatory in England. Eretz Yisrael goes with 2 hours east of Greenwich. So therefore, that's a line that I believe runs through Egypt somewhere. So Eretz Yisrael changed their clock. How much you change your clock depends on how far east you are from that line. The more east you get, the more you change your clock. So Maine, Eastport, Maine, and Van Buren, Maine, which are the eastern parts of Maine, changed their clock, a lot on that standard time. Baltimore changed it by about 6 minutes. North Dakota, the northwestern part of North Dakota, changed their clock 59 minutes because they were literally an hour off. So anyway, that's technicalities. Anyways, that's why that point of our bias is critical. So also an issue that came up, where's the Har bias exactly? So that's actually very interesting, not so commonly known. This was actually pointed out to me after I wrote the Sefer, and that is there's a machlokes rishonim as to where on our maps where the Kodesh hakadoshim was, and it has enough community. I'll tell you the halacha in a moment related to the international date line as well. But the standard, if you ask the average person in the street or the average tour guide at the Har Bayis, they will tell you that, of course, where the Dome of the Rock, right? That place is where the Kodesh hakadoshim was.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the opinion of the Radvaz, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the classic place. Now, so therefore now you'll change your clock from that point on.
If you go into the tunnel tours by the Kotel, I think there's a sign there.
They'll tell you straight away.
Right.
The question is how
and there's
far
a place there
from there.
Special place people go to daven right there.
Exactly, but how far in is it? That's if Dome of the Rock. There is a website of someone who actually mapped all the international date lines according to all the opinions based on. He's based it on this. It's Java. If you Google Java date line. Halacha, you'll get, I forgot the exact name of the website, but you get a map that shows you where the Har Bayis is, where all the date lines are, which again is going to be, for example, the Chazon Ish's date line is where Shabbos, you have enough music. Shabbos is going to be exactly 1/4 of the globe east of Yerushalayim, which is 90 degrees or 6 hours east of Yerushalayim. Now where? So you start with the Har Bayis. The Radak is of the opinion that the Makom HaMikdash was really the Dome of the Rock is where the Mizbeach, one of the Mizbeach was, which means the Kodesh hakadoshim is really about 180 feet to the west of that point. So you have enough Gemina of 180 feet now.
Now, normally 180 feet doesn't, I'm just trying to remember. According to the Chazon Ish, the date line doesn't go through
correct.
the landmass anyway.
Correct.
So it hugs the...
Correct. So in Hilchos Kiddush Levana, this is maybe a tenth of a second, I don't know, a quarter second. So no real practical for a minute. But I did find this afternoon's discussion actually a practical enough communal halacha between the Ravaz and the Radak.
Is.
There's an island in the Philippines. If you look at a map, you'll see the Chazon Ish's line, which again is 1/4 of the globe east of Yerushalayim. Now, just to explain one point, the Chazon Ish held that based on the Yisod Olam, who's a Talmud of the Rush, a student of the Rush, that the date line cannot run through land. And if it would, you think of the practical nafkaminas, you'd be Shabbos would be here, and using New York as an example, on 13th Avenue it would be, Friday afternoon, and on 14th Avenue they would be eating Shal Shudas if the date line ran through Borough Park, which would be of interest because you could keep Shabbos 2 days, or you could, if you're busy with work, you could spend Friday on 13th Avenue, and then
Hop
right
over
before
the line.
Lichtenstein, go to 14th Avenue, and now it's there by Shalshudas, an hour of Shabbos, and then you go back to work, with
Skip
over
Shabbos.
there. So that you can't have that. There's an island, so most goes through land. So when it goes through land, Chazal said Greira, which means
It hugs the coast.
practically the whole. If you go around the coast, then the whole land is going to follow the west. So Australia, for example, follows the western part of Australia. There's an island in the Philippines called the San Pedro Island, which is in the eastern Visaya area, and that island actually, if you look, you'll see that the Chazon Ish's date line misses it maybe by 50, 60 feet, which means that according to that island is a suffix Shabbos, because according to Chazon Ish it's an island, so it's really, it could come on Afkamina whether that line.
The 180
actually
feet
it.
makes a difference if it hits.
Correct.
If it hits the land or not.
Correct. Actually, come to think of it, though, might not be Nafkamina now because it's on the left side.
So it would
Nafkamina-
go around it anyway.
So it would. Well, it's either to the east of it. No. It may be on the west of it anyway. So it's Chazon Ish. Might not be a problem. So I may be incorrect on that. But we got to look for another island. If that's the case.
Where the 180 feet could make.
Right. Those Nafkaminas if you say Greira there or not.
Right.
But it's not practically a case. I think I'm incorrect, and that's a scratch that from the record.
Okay.
Now that I'm thinking it more, right, it's going to be on the west side, so Kohen Chazon Ish is going to be, Chayr will make enough community. I need a line on the other side. Okay.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, I just want to reiterate, we're here with Rabbi David Heber in the Starkey offices. Our webinars are held the last Wednesday of every month. And if you want to join us or get the emails about what the webinar is about, send us an email to info@star-k.org. Also, if you have questions about kashrus, about anything else that we can help you with, you can email it there or call us at 410-484-4110. Just a point of reference, next month, at the end of July, we'll be off for our summer break, and we'll continue, God willing, at the end of August. Okay, Rabbi, I was thinking about this extra second, from a hashkafa perspective, the Jewish outlook, that the Gemara says, Yesh kone olama b'shah achas, that a person can gain olam haba in 1 second. Shah literally means an hour, but over there it means one second. A person can do something in 1 second that he can. What can you say in 1 second? In 1 second, you say, "I'm sorry." That takes a second. You can do a lot in a second. Think
Of course.
about that.
So I have two hashkafas
Okay.
with the second. One is, first of all, you see that by Bilam, we're coming up next week.
All right.
Kosher,
All right.
is Karaga. Now, actually, a rega, there's about 7 or 8 shitas as to how long a rega is.
But he knew the second when Hashem
Exactly
gets
what it was.
angry.
It's actually
He
less
was
than a
going-
second,
I
like
know.
holidays. Just like all the decimals that to give a rega, all the shitas have an 8 in it. Somehow it's 0.8. I don't know the numbers in front of me, but so he was able to curse Klal Yisrael. Taisus asked, how do you curse in such a short time? Taisus says that he started that. So you see Mida Peranius, right? Saras, he can make problems in such a short time. Imagine how much you could do good in such a short time.
Oh, he could have said, doesn't want to answer that. He could have said, Kalem, destroy them.
Right. But
Destroy them, or he could have started at that time.
Exactly.
Right.
The other hashkafa, which I say over sometimes in drushes, is about a second. Is as follows. Klal Yisrael were medactic in halacha. We're very medactic in exactly when. And there's a section on tefillah, and section on kriyishma, and I'm talking about time now. And you really, the dikduk shabbat is very important. If a person is lax in that, they say, what's the difference if I miss it by 5 minutes or 10 minutes or a few seconds? Like, why is that a problem? So I like to give the following mashal. Imagine you have a Super Bowl being played, and your team's playing, and there's 1 second on the clock, and your team is on the score is, let's say, 31-29, and you're on the opposing team's 10-yard line. They call a timeout. The clock stops with 1 second left, and now all they need to do is bring out their field goal crew and kick a field goal in the 1 second remaining, and they win the Super Bowl. And the referees come and say, you know what? They played already 59 minutes, 59 seconds. Why are you drinking a cup? Everybody's tired. Everyone's going, it's only a second anyway. Forget the second, right? There would be riots. It would go to the Supreme Court. It would be it would be huge because it's actually there's a lot of money on the line. There's a lot of pride on the line. There's so many things on the line that's all hanging on that 1 second. That could be enough kamina that any sports fan will appreciate the huge difference between this team or that team winning. You're talking millions of dollars and ripple effect of what goes on. So no referee would ever do such a thing. So lahavdil elef alf elef revavais, right? We're given the opportunity to do mitzvahs which are worth more than Super Bowl trophies and worth more than all of that. Exponentially, you can't even be mishire what it's worth. So yeah, every second does count.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay. And the leap second gave us an opportunity to talk about all this Torah. So
Correct.
That
itself.
It's maybe that's why they created the leap second. No, because I read somewhere. Excuse me 1 second. I read that there's even a dispute among the experts whether or not we need these leap seconds.
Correct.
They instituted them in 1977, and then it's not clear. Not everybody's in agreement. They want to dissolve them. We don't need leap seconds.
Right.
So maybe
the
whole purpose of it maybe was so that we could have a Torah webinar about it.
I once called a government agency in Colorado. I was working on this Zmanim Sugya and I wanted some information. And I stumbled across this bureau and I called them up and I asked them, what it had to do with something, probably sunrise. I don't remember exactly, but it had to do with general time. So the person said, I only work on seconds. He told me there was his whole job. He was the professor of seconds.
I don't know anything about minutes, just seconds.
That's right. So I found that.
Don't ask me about hours. Don't ask me about days. Just
sunrise, sunset. I'm the Martha Asher of the seconds. So I couldn't even talk like I found that fascinating.
I see. That's interesting. Okay, so maybe you'll say a few words about the general impact of astronomy on the Jewish calendar.
But so we know, a lot of it we know it relates to times and zmanim. Times and Ma'ariv, Meshachos, Mincha, Ma'ariv, all relate to it. The Jewish calendar, of course, relates to it, and so on. What I wanted to focus on maybe is the impact of the Umas Ha'olam, the nations of the world, and their changes and how it impacts on our halacha. In other words, for example, one example would be daylight savings time. Daylight saving time is they add extra. They don't add the hour. They modify the clock. Everybody turns the clock ahead. In the summer, it's saving because you're basically shifting an hour of daylight from the early morning when most people are asleep to the evening where people could use it more. So in Baltimore, instead of the sun rising today at 4:40 and setting at approximately 7:40, it rises at 5:40 and sets at 8:40, and therefore the hour between 4:40 and 5:40 of sunlight where most people were asleep is now transferred to the evening where most people are going to utilize that, not have to turn on the lights and so on. That's the lumps behind it, but it had a huge impact on Klal Yisrael because Shabbos is an hour later, Motzei Shabbos is an hour later, people travel. Motzei Shabbos means it's you're ending an hour later on the clock. We work by the clock. It also, sunrises in the wintertime or the fall become difficult with the davening.
It becomes very late.
At the end of October, early November, it's extremely late, so people have shilas with how to daven so early while it's still dark.
I want to mention that we did have, we had a webinar that you spoke at. It should be on our archives, so if you want to look at Vimeo, Star K, Kosher, you'll see, type in daylight savings time, you'll see whoever expounds on that at length.
But the other thing is the change, in 1582 the calendar was changed and 10 days were taken out of the calendar, and now every 100 years, three out of every 400 years, 1700, 1800, 1900, 2100, 2200, there's a leap day that's dropped out, and that has practical ramifications on Talamatar, and it also, interestingly enough, really on our whole Yom Tovim, because we're always keeping the Jewish calendar in sync with the secular calendar. So, people like to have the summer. Schools typically start around Labor Day, but yet in an early year, that becomes difficult because then kids go to school right before Rosh Hashanah. In 1964, Erev Rosh Hashanah was Labor Day. In 1994, it was also the day, Labor Day, and then the next day was Erev Rosh Hashanah. So it becomes difficult. Had it not been for the calendar change in 1582, Rosh Hashanah would commonly fall out in August. That was a common, but it would definitely happen.
The end of August, you mean?
It would end of August, and you just think about it. The Hebrew calendar would be 13 days earlier than it is, which means on just mentally, that would mean instead of Rosh Hashanah beginning between September 5th and October 5th, roughly, it would begin, August 23rd to September 23rd, roughly. So you imagine Rosh Hashanah being, August 25th, 23rd, 25th. So that change,
That actually helped.
that actually puts it off. Again, could be we would work differently, and could be
School would be different. School
it
would
might be. Well,
different.
remember the seasons, the dates are a function of the seasons, but who knows? Who knows what would have been? But that's another interesting.
But it did have an effect. I want to mention, Rabbi Heber, that our sons are in the same class in school in 8th grade. They just graduated.
You should class on your son's speech at the graduation.
So I want to mention that my son says that your son picked up this bent you have for Zmanim, and my son says if you ask him Shmuley, if you ask Shmuley, like, when is Purim going to be in 4 years? I want to know what day of the week it's going to be. So he'll think a few minutes or a few seconds, and then he'll come up with it's a Thursday, whatever. It
gives us what to talk about on the way to and from shul. It's very good.
So that it's really it's a wonderful thing. Let's take some of these questions, and then we'll finish up, Rabbi Heber. There is a specific question Menashe is asking about Tein Tal Mutter, and I believe that Menashe emailed that question to us, and I think Rabbi Heber is going to get back to you separately on that. Moshe says, flying today from New York City to Israel via Moscow, you only get the Shkia and then the Netzach Chama, meaning there's very little time. Meaning there's no tzeis.
Right. Yeah. The problem is when you fly in the summer.
Tzeis.
When you fly in the summer.
When do you daven Maariv?
Right. What's happening there is that, see, if the planes would fly at the latitude, if you go from New York to Eretz Yisrael at the 40-degree latitude that New York is at 41 degrees, and then it would dip down, then this problem won't happen because the sun would go down a little earlier than New York because you've flown east. The problem is in the summer is that the planes fly north because it's actually quicker to go what they call the polar route or the Arctic route, to fly very, very far north over Iceland and so on. Even though on a map, on a flat map, it looks like you're going out of the way because you're going up, but the Great Circle route comes out much shorter. Just the way to conceptualize it is that the number of degrees latitude, if you're going a longitude from one to another, actually the closer you get to the equator, the more miles it is. In other words, if you go from 75 degrees to 76 degrees on a straight line at your latitude, when you're at the equator, it's many more miles than when you go when you're up in northern Canada.
The curvature of the Earth.
Right, exactly. So if you look at a globe, you'll see
right.
Those latitudes seem to get closer. The latitude than miles they are. So anyway, that's the Great Circle route. So the issue is because you're going so far north, you're in north, as we know. The further north you go, the less dark there is. So that's really the issue. Ma'ariv, you're lucky you're getting a sunset. According at least to the calculations you're looking at, maybe there's a wonderful website, hightables.com, which will give you this. You should not Ma'ariv at the Shkia, even though if you normally down when it gets dark. Grab that opportunity. If the high tables told you the sun's going to go down at such a time, look out the window, and if it's a shtickle dark, daven. And even if it's almost dark, or it's basically shkia-ish, you're at least a plaga mincha, and you have the ability to daven Ma'ariv, and then keep looking out the window when it's about as dark as you think it's going to get. Then say Krishma again. But that's you want to chap Ma'ariv then.
However, you mentioned before the international date line. I have one question for you. How many times did you cross that line in the past,
so believe it or
27 years?
Believe it or not, I was late to the real date, not I shouldn't say the secular international date line, Loy Zachisi, right? I've never been to Australia or flown there. It's the famous story with the Halacha Kurkavan, right? They were studying in yeshiva, in Yardea, and there's a part of the body of the animal called the Kurkavan, and they got hold of it and they said, "Oh, this is the holy Kurkavan, right?" That finally. So one day I'll
the holy dayline.
The Halakha dayline. I did cross the recently for the first time. I got to cross at least one dayline, which is the
Halacha
dayline. Well, according to one sheet, one general opinion of Rabbi Chimcha Tuchinski and those who hold like him, and that is a line that's on the opposite side of Yerushalayim, which is 12 hours east, 180 degrees
right.
east. That line is between California and Hawaii. So I actually flew over that line going to Hawaii do an initial inspection of the two facilities, Dean Foods, which is now coming under the, many of them be Start D products for their dairy products, and their power products. Eventually we'll have a Start K on them.
I want to know if they asked you to go so that you could go over the dateline.
Well,
Is that what
it was also,
besides
to Hawaii, you've never been to Hawaii, added to the list of states, calculated. But what was interesting on the plane was I really wanted to know when are we crossing this line. It had,
okay.
and there are issues, when Shabbos wasn't there, it was there in the middle of the week.
Shabbos is
according to the Shabbos, you put on tefillin again. Ryan holds you don't need to.
Mm-hmm.
There are opinions that hold, maybe you should, etc. So that there are some shabbos that come up. If there's certainly major shabbos if you're there for Shabbos. I was there on a Tuesday and a Wednesday. I was in Honolulu, did the initial inspection there. Then I was in Hilo, which is to the east. Anyway, on the plane, I asked the flight attendant, what longitude are we at? So she said, I don't know, I'll ask the pilot. So the pilot said to her, no one's ever asked that question before. So it turned out we were east of where we were. Then
I think you can bring a GPS on a plane and it will work.
Yeah, so could
I think it will work, because the satellite, it's not communicating like back and forth. I think it's legal.
Okay, I didn't think of that. Anyway, I asked again later.
Next time.
I figure we're around there, just to know, not much to see. Look down, you see water, the Pacific Ocean. But I asked, where's the latitude? So the lady looked at me strangely, and I had to say, well, the last flight attendant just asked the pilot. So they called the pilot, and we'd already crossed.
I see.
Because we crossed that line. In this day and age, you gotta watch what you ask.
Right, you gotta be careful. They think
you don't know what who knows? Yeah, who knows? But okay, I looked. Just say religious reasons.
Okay. All right, Rabbi Heber. So we want to thank you for joining with us today.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for that interesting discussion. I see that we have put up over here the webinar about the calendar, the twist of the Jewish calendar is up there. You can take a look at that. Again, Rabbi Heber's book is available in digital form on HebrewBooks.org, and then that's hard because you have to print it out.
Yeah, so that
it's hard. It's called Shara Zmanim, and we have over there we put up on the chat before the phone number to buy it, which is 718-377-0047. So I hope that you'll take advantage of that, because some really interesting things in there. And I want to invite you to come back and join with us again at the end of August, the last Wednesday, God willing, at 12 noon, or actually it will be at the end of July, where we're going to be on summer break.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
okay.
but I think since the leap second will happen already, actually it will be 11:59 and 59 seconds on August, the last Wednesday of August. So make sure you get your clocks, your watch is set exactly right. You don't want to miss even a second. Thanks again, Rabbi Heber. Thank you all for joining. Take care. Have a good day. Be well.